All right, so let's get the show on the road. We got people filling in. Welcome to the June CSJ conference. It is a 2-hour conference with the Ruby and above Patreon members. This is recorded and we post on the website. We do this with all of our special guests. John will be joining us, I believe, not next week, but the following week on, I believe, Thursday night at the same time, John. So basically 2 weeks from today, you'll be going live in front of the audience on YouTube to basically discuss the same content we're talking about tonight. But we kind of want to provide like a more intimate setting but it's not like just some litmus test to see if we're going to have you on the live stream or anything like that. It's not about that. It's more of like, it's just something we do for the Ruby members. It's kind of like an early access approach that we had for all the other guests. Although I haven't been able to schedule Jamie as a guest yet, we are working to that point. So anyway, I'd like to do a proper introduction for John here. So John Brisson is the what's your official title over at fixyourgut.com?
Editor-in-chief, co-founder.
Yeah. Yeah, co-founder and editor-in-chief at fixyourgut.com. Now, in my humble opinion, Mr. John here is the world's #1 expert in microbiology, or at least easily top 5, and that's very significant. The reason is because, like, from a healthcare standpoint, it's really nice to have access to TI Hero and TI Hero's point of view from a healthcare standpoint on a regular basis. And this man has been able to perform miracles. This man has saved my life with my liver condition. And he's also saved the lives of people that I care about deeply. And I've been referring coaching clients to Mr. Brisson for a while now. While I have provided referrals, I'm not sure all of the clients have gone with John or made that decision, but it has been communicated to them when they've had the opportunity. So anyway, be that as it may, John's unique perspective and his unique story has been something that's, it's really incredible. And, before we actually start talking about specifics about health and whatnot, because I got a list of different topics to talk about, like anywhere from vaccines to general allopathic care versus naturopathy, etc. But like John, if you could share with us like what your history is, like what actually got you into microbiology and utilizing it for assisting other people with their health, etc.
Yeah, well, definitely, I'm glad to be here. To meet all of y'all. I've known CS Joseph for a long time. We've been personal friends for a while. He's a really great dude and everything that he does and everything. So first I want to, start off with that, but you guys all know you've already heard everything like that. So, hey, you gave me praise first. I can only give it back, brother.
All right, bro.
It makes us shy. All right. But
okay.
So anyway, let's see here. I've been sick all my life. I was born 3 months premature in 1985. Had asthma and allergies growing up as a child, severe asthma. I was hospitalized many times, almost missed kindergarten because of it. I lost both my parents when I was young. I lost my mother to systemic lupus when I was 7 years old. I lost my father to hepatitis C when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
I've had my own health issues. Other than that, when I was a teenager, my appendix burst in the 8th grade. I went a week before getting it taken out. I should have died from that. But at last I did not. I'm here. They had to open me back up and do a peritoneal wash. I was in the hospital for a month during that time period. Almost failed 8th grade because of it, but they allowed me to pass because of my grades. And after that, I had to have abdominal hernia surgery. So I've had issues, sick out through my whole life. But I thought I had an iron gut even though all that happened until I got H. pylori about 10 years ago. I remember the day like it was nothing. I was at my grandmother's-in-law's house and they were having a fish fry. And for the first time since I could ever remember, my stomach started burning, which I felt was odd because it's never burned in the past. Even with my appendix burst, all my gastrointestinal surgeries beforehand, I never felt anything like that before. So I panicked, so I started going to the doctor trying to find out what was wrong with me. And my resting heart rate was about 130 at that time. And they kept just telling me it was stress and anxiety, but I knew better than that. And so I was taking an ACE inhibitor called lisinopril, which led to a lot of my issues that I eventually had figured out. And so my grandpa was a pharmacist. He told me after a few days of just living with total anxiety, horrible gastrointestinal issues, high resting heart rate, that I should go get my blood pressure and heart rate checked, go off the lisinopril, even though ACE inhibitors are supposed to lower resting heart rate. But any medication can cause any side effect. To go off of them and see what would happen. So I did. And within 2 days, the resting heart rate went completely to normal, but I was left with severe adrenal fatigue from a zinc deficiency because ACE inhibitors deplete zinc. It's been in multiple case studies.
Wow.
And of course, zinc is very important for male physical health because zinc is vital for testosterone production and for sperm production. So at this time, I didn't know, I couldn't figure out all these issues I was having, why, for years I had issues with impotence and stuff, but it was from the ACE inhibitor because they're actually thinking about using ACE inhibitors as male contraceptive, actually. So now looking back on it, I realized that my plummeted zinc levels caused me, my immune system to plummet, which made me more susceptible to H. pylori because zinc is very important for immunity, as well as low testosterone. So I developed a condition called silent reflux, which is different than standard reflux, which is also GERD or heartburn, where I didn't have any of the standard symptoms where a person has heartburn, their esophagus will burn or they'll have pain. Mine went up all the way. I had no pain. I didn't feel anything. I just had a constant feeling of something that was in my throat, and my nasal passages would get very congested, and my station tubes would get very congested, and my mouth would have a very dry feeling to it. So I went to the doctor, and they finally did some tests on me over a long period of time and figured out that I had silent reflux. And I was like, okay, so what do I do about it? You just have to go on a PPI for the rest of your life. We don't know much about the condition. That's what it is. Well, that wasn't good enough for me. So I started researching. And you have to remember, from my background, I was a huge believer in conventional medicine.
Right.
Majority of my life. My grandfather was a pharmacist. I grew up taking medication, some that I wish that I did not take, like Accutane, for example, for acne because of its lifelong associated side effects with taking it. So
what kind of side effects?
As far as Accutane is concerned?
Yeah.
I mean, one reason look at my hair, obviously, is it because of DHT. Accutane destroyed my keratin production for my hair. For one, it leads to male pattern baldness, as well as it's been known to cause inflammatory bowel disease by making the body weaker to Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis, which is a bacteria found in ruminant animals like cattle that produces a similar condition to called Johann's disease, which has the same exact clinical manifestation as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Ulcerative colitis is just MAP dysbiosis of the gastrointestinal tract in and of itself. Crohn's disease is when it goes systemic. That's the only two difference between the two conditions. Nonetheless, with silent reflux, it took me years. I started, researching, doing, figure out supplements, which ones to take, just reading study after study after study. And around that time was when I listened to, well, I actually need to go back. My middle child, Abel.
Right.
He was born before I even found a fixture gut. He had an extremely rare medical condition. It was called congenital myopathy with excess muscle spindles. He was born 6th in the world at the time with this condition. The doctors had no idea what was wrong with him whatsoever. When my wife was pregnant with him, she suffered from polyhydramose, but that was the only symptom until about the 35th week when they went to do an ultrasound. They discovered that he was not moving. Wow. So they decided to do an emergency cesarean section, not knowing, they thought he was still alive because his heart was beating, but he was not moving at all. So when he came out, of course, he was contractured all the way up muscularly, and they had no idea what was wrong with him. And the local hospital, Kafer Valley, they were telling us, well, we'll keep him alive. We'll try to transfer him to UNC Chapel Hill. And I remember when, I won't say the name of who was the head of the neonatal unit at that time. He told me that it was probably better off if Abel would have died.
Wow.
Because they didn't know what, they figured that he was going to die any day.
Yeah.
So he went to Chapel Hill. We spent months trying to figure out what was wrong with him. The neurogeneticist, Dr. Fan, who later became his biggest advocate, and actually one of my biggest advocates as well. She's a neurogeneticist. She was like, there's nothing you could do. He's going to get weaker with his medical condition because he was on a ventilator and his muscles were very contractured and they still didn't know what was wrong with him. And she was like, he may have this, he may have, spinal muscular atrophy. But we're going to do a muscle biopsy and send it up to the Mayo Clinic, and we're going to try to figure out what's wrong with him.
Right.
So they did that, and so the doctor that analyzed the biopsy, the pathologist, and I guess later it was there was a bunch of doctors that looked at it, and he said, I've only seen this once, something similar, and the guy was like 65 years old. And he was like, I think it's a condition called congenital myopathy with excess muscle spindles, where, okay, so your muscle fibers are what makes you strong. It's what, but your muscle spindles are what tell your brain, hey, my arm's behind my back. So you have muscle awareness of where your muscles are at all times. Okay. Well, he had too many muscle spindles and not enough muscle fibers. So his muscles were very weak, and they were afraid that he was going to continue to get weak and die.
Wow.
Well, God has bigger plans, I guess. And so when my wife and I were debating whether or not to take him off the ventilator, he spit the ventilation tube out. There's no medical explanation for that. His lungs should have atrophied during that time period. His throat muscle should have atrophied during that time period from a lack of using it because he had a G tube. He was being fed from a gastro tube to the stomach. But no, he was able to breathe on his own. And there's no medical explanation for that. None that I know of. And so we took him home. He was on hospice. They still thought he was going to die. And he was getting better. He was recovering. But the nutritionist said that he wasn't getting enough feeding, that he wasn't gaining weight enough. And so we had just put him on a homemade formula. And the doctors always wanted him to be lean because majority of the kids, actually a majority of all 5 of them beforehand, died of cardiomyopathy. They died from heart failure. So they didn't want him to gain too much weight, but she was like, hey, are you guys feeding him? If you guys aren't feeding him, I'm going to report you to, DSS. Even though all the nurses said we were. I don't know what her crusade was. I guess because we were using a homemade formula over a conventional, regular, ready-to-made G-tube formula. So we started feeding him more, and he started aspirating into his lungs. And I kept telling them that's what was going on for months, but they would not believe me. He would get better in the hospital when they fed him less, but he would get worse when we take him back home and they put him on normal feeding. But they kept just saying it was just his condition getting worse. So eventually it caused, somewhat damage to his lungs. They had to intubate him and put him on a ventilator. And eventually, after about, I think it's 3 or 4 months after everything, I finally had convinced them that aspiration was the issue, and it was not him getting weaker. So they reduced his feeding, allowed me to do the homemade formula again, and he started recovering. He started coming back. He started getting better. And
How many people did you have to TI hero to get in their face and correct them on literally everything?
I had
to save your son.
I had one doctor tell me, Chase, that the 100 milligrams of magnesium that we were giving him to keep his bowels moving, because, when we walk around, it moves our lymphatic system, but it also helps to move our migrating motor complex too. And Abel wasn't really able to do that. So he'd be prone to constipation. I mean, even the best even the best liquid diet, elemental diet in the world is going to have some gastrointestinal issues.
Right.
So we were giving magnesium, 100 milligrams. It was prescribed by Dr. Fan. She was perfectly fine with it, to get his bowels moving. The doctor would not give it to him in the hospital because she said that would cause hypermagnesemia, too much magnesium at that dosage. And then she started to quote me about what happens when you give preeclamptic women too much magnesium and you make a hypermagnesium state in their body, and they become where they can't move. They become, so lethargic, you can pick up their arm and you can pop that down. And I told her, I said, that's not going to happen over 100 milligrams of magnesium a day that he's been on for months. Are you crazy? But I don't have an MD behind my name. So
Oh
that's what I
yeah,
did.
those TE Nemesis credentials, right, John? You know, because the credentials make everyone else smarter than you. How many STJs, I wonder, you've had to like combat with all the crap, you know?
As an INTP, it really infuriates me, because I believe more on what a person knows, and a person can have a million degrees on their wall, and that doesn't mean they know anything. And I'm not saying I know
Preach it.
either, but still, nonetheless. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, so you know, Dr. Fan, I talk with her, and she goes talk to the doctor. They put him back on magnesium, okay. But I was just shaking my head the whole entire time. I was just like, ah. So anyway, back to everything. One night, Abel had a blood clot from the previous trauma that was done to him through intubation and the trauma that was done to his lungs.
Right.
And it traveled to his brain.
Oh.
And so, you know, we took him to the hospital. They were still trying to figure out, you know, what was going on. And they moved him to UNC Chapel Hill. They started doing a whole bunch of tests on him. And his organs started failing. And I told, you know, my wife, I was like, I don't think there's nothing I can do. I don't, you know, because there's reached a certain point where there's nothing anybody can do. And I didn't think the amount of mitochondrial support or anything, you know, I don't think there's nothing his brain was too far damaged. So we made the decision to take him off life support. We went up to the garden so we'd be able to die with dignity. It was a garden on top of the hospital, UNC Chapel Hill. And Tiffany held him. And his heart has strengthened so much from all the mitochondrial support that I had done for his heart that his heart had beat for about 10 to 15 minutes without oxygen. And the doctors had to keep checking on him to pronounce him dead and had to keep coming back because his heart was so strong, even though all of the previous children beforehand died from cardiomyopathy. He did not. And there's a paper, you can look it up, that was written in his case. It's the longest living child with MEMS. It was published before his death. And there it talks about his heart and how healthy his heart is. It also mentions, you know, me as, you know, one of the most knowledgeable experts on his case, even though I have no medical degree whatsoever. And if anybody ever has a child with MEMS, they should contact me, because the doctors knew that I knew about it. I was the reason why he had lived for so long and the reason why he would have continued to live if I would have fought for him initially and just told them to screw off, go call CPS on me. But I was scared. I was younger. I didn't know what to do. Right. And if the feeding stuff never would have happened, he would still probably be alive here today. Right. And it's my greatest regret. Yeah. But it's something I'm going to have to live with. But yeah,
sometimes you're just so ignorant that you just can't help it.
I was scared. And I'll never be scared again. I was scared. Yeah. I knew it was best for him always. And I should have been like, do what take me to court. You know, you're not going to take him away. He's handicapped. You're not going to take him away from me. All the nurses would have stood up for me. All the, doctors would have. And actually, his pulmonologist actually later apologized to me right before Abel died, that I was right, that it was aspiration and it was not him getting weaker. But it is what it is, and it haunts me to this day and I'll still have to live with it. But again, the reason why one of the main reasons why I am doing Fix Your Gut is for him. My health work is for him, in honor of him, in honor of all the family members that I've lost, in the honor of anybody who loses family members to the medical system. Not to saying that I'm completely against conventional medicine. It's one thing I want to make clear. I'm not. In trauma-based situations and diagnostic medicine, conventional medicine is greatly needed. Right. However, it has a horrible track record for quote-unquote autoimmune diseases and a horrible track record for cancer. But that being said, I don't think natural medicine will solve everything. If I go get in a car accident tomorrow, God forbid, trauma-based, conventional medicine will stabilize me and save my life. However, conventional medicine using cold laser treatment, for example, which I used on my grandfather twice after he broke his hip at the age of 90, after both times the doctors would say after a partial hip replacement and a full hip replacement that he would never walk again. He walked again both times afterwards. So booyah. Yeah. So, I believe
taking it to the man, T.I. Hero style.
I believe more in an integrative approach when it comes to medicine, for sure. And if anybody, There's doctors I respect. There's nurses I respect. Heck, I actually respect most nurses more than I do doctors in a lot of situations.
Preach it.
That being said, they are blinded by the system, just like I was, just like my grandfather was. So it's just it's difficult the way the system is. So real quick, I guess one last thing, and we'll move on, is how Fixture got started was I listened to Dave Asprey, Bulletproof, on Joe Rogan. And so I joined the Bulletproof forums and started talking with like-minded individuals on there. And I met Jason Hooper and Titus Wilson, both who work with me at Fix Your Gut. They're other partners. And we just built Fix Your Gut. We just started with it. I started writing blogs. I helped, various of their family members who had health issues, and even themselves who had health issues. Jason Hooper, I could talk about it because he talked about it on a podcast. He had to have an emergency abdominal surgery due to he has some rare condition. I have to look it up, where it causes benign intestinal tumors to develop over time. And he was taking a soil-based probiotic called Dr. Friedlander's probiotic at the time.
Oh, it reminds me of trouble I had from a certain probiotic that nearly killed me. And
the
reason I started this YouTube channel.
Dr. O'Hara's, which I don't recommend, by the way. Another Enterococcus faecalis, which can be a very bacteria that is known to have antibiotic resistant and cause a lot of severe infections. But yeah, with Jason, that's how we met. He asked me some questions on the Bulletproof forums and said, how do I take care of Bacillus subtilis? I told him what to do. Of course, Jason Hooper takes the balls to the walls approach and decides to take thyme oil, which is the strongest antimicrobial agent that we have naturally. And he recovered. And so, he's been working with us at Fix Your Gut, to this day. So, that's why I founded Fix Your Gut in the first place, because I was sick and I wanted to get better. And I've lost many family members and have had many family members who were ill. And I didn't want people to be sick anymore. I've given away tens of thousands of copies of my book. If anybody emails me at John@FixYourGut, I'll send you a copy, PDF form. I do offer coaching, and yes, I do want to make a living for my family, but I've coached pro bono people who have not been able to afford me, and I try to give as much information out that I can for free, because I know what it is to be ill. And that's probably me being an INTP. I'm the world's worst businessman. That being said, though, I much rather
the INTP doormat.
Yeah, but still, I know what it is to be ill, and I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. And it's just I can't do it. So that's the story of Fix Your Gut, and that's the story of me.
Fair enough. Well, it's really cool that you've been able to assist. How many people? Do you have any metrics on how many books have been downloaded or purchased or given away, or how many coaching sessions that you've done? How many amounts of hours that you've put into all of this to try to help people find actual, ways to go in there? And also what about some crazy diseases or symptoms that people that should have died, but they're not dead now, as a result of your help? Do you have anything relating to that?
As far as that, I give generalities, or people that I know that don't mind that I give their story. I probably have coached tens of thousands of people at this point, if not maybe approaching 100,000 at this point. I've been doing it for 8 years, As far as writing, hours upon hours, many books, hundreds of thousands of copies of the PDF. I've sold tens of thousands of copies on Amazon. As far as metrics, it's about the only thing I can think of. Millions. I've had millions of views on my site. Of course, they've been censoring me lately. They've been going after natural health for the past 2 years, and Google, each time they've updated their analytic, has dropped my traffic significantly. But it is what it is. Now, as far as stories, Hooper, for example, he had a severe Bacillus subtilis infection of his intestinal tract. He almost died from that. It was antibiotic resistant. So that was definitely an issue for him.
Right.
Let's see here. I could talk about my friend. We'll call him Matt. I don't think he'd care. He had Crohn's disease. We met because my son's friend was friends with his son. And ever since I've coached him to stay off of ruminant animal products, supplement the omega-3 fatty acids, and get sunlight, he hasn't had a flare. And he's been in remission for about a year and a half. Holden's former occupational therapist had ulcerative colitis to the point where they were going to cut out a portion of his colon.
Wow.
He's in remission. Once he gave up ruminant animal products, started ingesting omega-3 fatty acids and getting sun. And last time I took, he's been perfectly fine. As long as he doesn't eat any beef, he doesn't have a flare-up. So, I mean, there's other stuff. I don't know.
Well, there's also, I mean,
my grandfather breaking his hip twice.
Well, let's look at it from my experience with you, John. I mean, I had a liver condition. I had an Enterococcus faecalis infection as a result of taking a probiotic. And you and I worked on this for many, many years. You know, my liver enzymes ended up becoming out of control at the beginning of last year. They didn't know what to do for me. You got me on this oil of oregano essential oil protocol, which definitely, it stopped the majority of the symptoms. We got things under control. And then we started working on rebuilding my gut health and getting my immune system back on track. And, you know, it was incredible. And I got so close to, potentially, developing cirrhosis of the liver, because that's what, one of my doctors told me that was imminent at one point after doing some imaging. We were able to get in there and save it just in time. And that's one of the reasons why this YouTube channel exists, is because I was afraid that I was actually going to die and I was going to have limited time to live my life. So I had to get my mind onto the internet as soon as possible, so to make sure that none of it would go to waste. But John here, ladies and gentlemen, has basically saved my life. And it's been,
I don't know about that.
It's been, well, I mean, yeah, it's been ongoing, but at a minimum, definitely prolonged it in such a way where it's really meaningful. There's also my ex-girlfriend, Kim. She had developed brain tumors, and the doctors couldn't even figure out what was going on. Lesions. Yeah, brain lesions. And she had lesions on her brain stem, inhibiting like half of her body from even working. Like, it wouldn't even work. One side of her body was cold. The other side was like regular temperature. It was pretty bad. And John here figured out that she was developing Devik syndrome, that a varicella virus broke her blood-brain barrier and was infesting her central nervous system. So we adjusted her diet, got her on liposomal lysine, and basically those tumors went away. It was unexplainable. The neuro doctors couldn't really figure out why that was the case. The neurologists, they had like no clue. And
that happens all the time. That happens all the time. I have a gastroenterologist that tell me I put people with IBD into remission, and then they're like, "Oh, just because you tell them to avoid ruminant animal products, it maybe takes an antimicrobial protocol or some prebiotics." It's a lifelong condition. It's autoimmune disease. There's no way that there's been 15 years of studies backing out that it's caused by this single mycobacterium found in ruminant animals. No, that can't be true.
Yeah, exactly. But is that the case for all ruminant animals, though? I mean, I heard though that venison may be exempt from that. But is that true, or is that
some people with MAP have issues with venison?
Right.
I usually just recommend giving up all ruminant animal meat and dairy, and just stick with poultry, which it does get Mycobacterium avium, but for some reason IBD, it's a different strain. They don't react to it. And seafood is their main sources of meat consumption.
Right.
And pork, sometimes pork, because pork isn't technically a ruminant animal.
Right. I do eat a little bit of pork. I mostly eat poultry. I do have a little bit of venison every now and then, and in the rare case of steak, and I'm actually having steak tonight. But I did completely give up dairy as per your recommendation, John, and it's been fantastic ever since. My symptoms have gone down at least by half just off of that alone, and I'm mostly stable, ever since. And then also I started doing that antiviral protocol after we figured out that the other half of my symptoms were actually being caused by varicella viruses. And doing the antivaricella virus protocol has been exquisite. Licorice root tea, black
Oh,
elderberry,
lysine.
lemon balm, lysine. It's been incredible, because I have herpes simplex virus 1, which is like the mouth herpes, which 65% of the population of the planet has. And I also have HSV4, which is Epstein-Barr virus, which 95% of the population of the planet has. So because of these two varicella viruses that I have to deal with, they could do a lot more.
Not varicella, herpes viridae. Varicella is a herpes viridae virus.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you. Gotta enjoy that TI hero.
I'm sorry.
Never not correct me. So, but yeah, but fair enough. We actually got some questions from some of the audience here. So Vicky asks, what are 3 key things you do for your own gut health every day, which could be useful for us?
Well, okay, 3 things. One is simple. It's just diet. Diet greatly affects the microbiome. What you eat, what you put in, the bacteria, the yeast, the parasites, the viruses, whatever's down there, they're going to react to it. Archaea, whatever's living in your gut, they're going to react to whatever you ingest. So you could change your microbiome fairly quickly by just following a healthy diet. So it depends on the person. Now, I like the perfect health diet, as Chase well knows, but not every diet is perfect for everyone. I will say that, first of all, the standard American diet is the worst diet possible. And then from there, if you want to change to veganism and carnivorism, I put them on an equal level because I think they lack certain nutrients on both sides. Now, if you're doing it for spiritual reasons or for ethical reasons, then yeah, that's different. But if you're doing it for straight dietary reasons, yes, they are healthier than the standard American diet, but both have their pros and cons. And then after that would be a more natural paleo omnivore type diet, which I think is probably the best. Now, some people might need a more ketogenic side of that, so they'll cut the carbs more. Some people may eat more carbs and they'll eat more perfect health diet. So it kind of switches between what a person needs. Now, if you cut out certain things, like artificial sweeteners are very bad for the gut. Sucralose, for example, which is chlorinated sugar, there are many studies of how it increases proteobacteria, which is yes, okay. Which is with proteobacteria. The main issue with them is they are gram-negative. They are endotoxin producers, but the endotoxins that they do produce are worse than a lot of your other bacteria that are gram-negative, that do not fall under the proteobacteria phylum. So your standard proteobacteria are E. coli, Salmonella, Vibrio cholerae, which causes cholera, Helicobacter, which causes ulcers and gastritis, H. pylori, your Yersinia, which of course Yersinia pestis is known as what caused the Black Plague, and Legionella. So these are all horrible bacteria that are known to cause horrible infections. So you pretty much, as far as your diet is concerned, you want to increase the good guys, which tend to be more of your lactobacillus, your bifidobacterium, your Firmicutes, which are, well, both of those are Firmicutes, Rhizobiria, which is a Firmicutes, Rhuminococcus, which is a Firmicutes, Faecalibacterium prasinensky, Bifidobacterium, which is an Actinobacteria, Akkermansia. This is stuff that you want to try to build up. So how you do that is you eat like a healthy, don't eat McDonald's, eat lots of fruits and vegetables in season locally if you can find them. If you can't find them locally in season, it's still better than eating standard American diet crap. So your gut bacteria will like a lot of vegetable matter. It'll like some protein, especially omega-3 fatty acids. Akkermansia likes omega-3 fatty acids. Healthy oils like coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed sesame oil, avocado oil.
Avocado oil, great.
Those are all healthy. And then from there, if you can tolerate fermented foods, some are better than others. I know one of Vicky's other question was milk kefir. Kefir could be okay. Usually, as far as fermented foods are concerned, yogurt is the most problematic. It could be because of the A1 casein. If you had European yogurt with A2 casein, it may be better. Goat yogurt may be better tolerated as well. It could be the specific strains that they use to ferment yogurt, which produces a lot of histamine, a lot of your Streptococcus thermophilus, a lot of your lactobacilli. So yogurt seems to be the most problematic. And then kefir, not so much, but still can be problematic because there's a lot of yeast in it. There's a lot of yeast in kefir that some people may react to. There's a lot of histamine in kefir. Coconut kefir is probably better than, cow's milk kefir is probably the worst. Goat's milk kefir is probably better. And then coconut kefir is probably the best out of all three of them. And also kefir's got a lot of sugar in it, like yogurt has a lot of sugar. Sour cream is next. Beet kvass is probably next. As far as beet kvass, sauerkraut, kimchi are probably on that same level. Now the best, and Chase can probably attest to this, but not the best for everyone, because remember, everyone's different. But the best overall fermented food for the gut is probably kombucha.
Oh yeah.
If you could tolerate tea, and you don't have delactate issues and dehistamine issues, they can work very well. Yes, Dr. Townsend Brew Doctor kombucha. That's the best one by far.
Spiced apple and mint lemonade are my favorite flavors, and I just had a mint lemonade earlier today. I could definitely attest to that for sure. Brew Doctor has definitely helped me get control of my gut issues for sure.
And I used to be against kombucha until I actually did the research and was like, well hold on, maybe I'm wrong. And I
but it's all about specific strains, though. Like not all kombucha.
Yeah, that is true. A lot of them have bacillus, and I'm not a fan of hemostatic soil organisms, your bacillus probiotics. I think there's a lot of risks with them. Prescriptive cyst, for example, megaspore. I'm one of the lone dissenters on the internet about these because I think probiotics should be considered as medicine. And by a lot of people, they're not. They'll say, "Oh, go just take probiotics." If you got to know what you're taking before you take them, because they can cause issues just like anything else can. So first is diet. Second is sunlight. A lot of people are unaware that your microbiome actually changes from your exposure to sunlight. Right. And no, it's not vitamin D that's produced. The microbes ingest the vitamin D because how could they? The vitamin D does, you're not ingesting the vitamin D. It's right from your skin to your bloodstream to the liver and then to wherever it's needed in the body to the bloodstream again. So it's literally because the bacteria on your skin, when the sun hits them, when light hits them, they talk to other bacteria and rally them or decry them. It's called corium sensing. So usually when you get sunlight, it's been shown that good bacteria, like lactobacillus, for example, and bifidobacterium, which are probiotic, and rosaberia tend to increase. Bacteroids, which can be good, it makes up a good 20 to 30% of the average gut. But in many people with digestive issues, it's very high, and I have to knock it down. If you're on a carnivore diet, you're probably dealing with a lot of bacteroids. So you got to be careful with increasing them. It will decrease them. It'll actually lower them. So sunlight in and of itself is exposure is vital for the microbiome. Also, sunlight exposure, in and of itself, it produces endogenous opioids to kill pain. The light hitting your eye and the activation of melanopsin increases serotonin production and dopamine production. And so it gives, awakens. Of course, the serotonin will be later methylated to melatonin when you're sleeping, hopefully in a dark room with nothing else on, because when you go to bed, you should be sleeping in complete darkness. I do.
Yeah, I try my best. I gotta get a cloak on my windows. I just changed bedrooms.
So that is paramount for proper health. And third, I guess for digestion, sunlight, diet, squatty potty.
Yeah. It's
simple. You can buy one at Bed Bath & Beyond for $20 and $30. You put it underneath your toilet. It corrects the anal rectal angle. It puts stress off of the puborectalis muscle because we were born to defecate squatting, and as human beings, we should still squat, but we don't. Through the invention of the porcelain throne, it doesn't happen. So your anus, your anal rectal angle is curved, so it puts pressure on this muscle that goes around, called the puborectalis muscle, that kind of controls the bottom part of the migrating motor complex of the anus. Because your anus technically you have two chambers. You have a lower sphincter and an upper sphincter, and they both have to be timed properly. So when you're sitting on this throne and you're not squatting how you're biologically designed to use the bathroom, it offsets that. So in doing so, you end up becoming more constipated. You end up retaining more stool. And it's one of the few things, funny enough, that I can get my wife to do. And as she swears by it, is a squatty potty. So I definitely get one. It's very cheap. Anybody can do it for their digestive health. It's something that you should be doing. So that'd probably be my third recommendation.
And we already touched kefir. We had someone bring up a comment about Logo says, my mom apparently has that Epstein-Barr thing and says and she says I probably has it too. Interesting. She also has recently been diagnosed with dystonia and stiff person's disease. It's really weird.
Yeah, most people most people have Epstein-Barr. They're asymptomatic. Now you'll recognize Epstein-Barr as it's the main causes the main condition mononucleosis, which is the kissing disease. But many people have had asymptomatic Epstein-Barr where you came in contact with it, either kissing somebody who had it at the time and they were symptomatic or asymptomatic, or you drank after somebody and your immune system fought it off. But with the herpes viridae viruses, they live in the cranial nerves. Okay, once they go dormant, they live in the cranial nerves. They're not like the cold virus where once you're done with the many rhinoviruses that you can get throughout the life, because there's many different individual rhinoviruses that you come in contact with, you get over them. You're one and done. That's it. You're done. Not with these herpes viridae viruses. They live in the cranial nerves and they'll come out. So varicella will come out as shingles. When you got chickenpox as a kid, that is the manifestation of varicella. And then it goes into generally the trigeminal nerve. But it lies dormant there. And then if your immune system is brought down, it can become activated because your immune system is not keeping it in check anymore. And it can start infecting other nerves and spread down your spinal column and then start erupting on your skin, which is external shingles, but you can actually get internal shingles, which is inside. You might just be in pain. Or like me, I used to get varicella reactivation separate from Chase, where my face would become numb, where the trigeminal nerve is, and I'd have shortness of breath.
I would get that as well, consistently.
And that might have been a trigger of silent reflux. Viral reactivation is a known cause of silent reflux. So, okay, so when we talk about my third book, if I ever get around to it, it's going to be before hormones, Chase. You're going to have to wait.
John, no.
Is on autoimmune conditions, because a majority of autoimmune conditions aren't autoimmune.
So you got to throw Anthony William under the bus.
The body doesn't decide to attack itself for shits and giggles. Okay, it just doesn't happen. All right, I didn't mean to cuss. I'm sorry, but it's one thing that really triggers me to the moon. All right, the body one day just wakes up and it's like, oh, I'm just going to start attacking. I don't know, the brain. I don't know, the lungs. And so majority of these autoimmune conditions, whether it's lupus, which seems to be caused by Staphylococcus dysbiosis, MS, which seems to be caused by herpes viridae reactivation and H. pylori, whether it's IBD, which seems to be caused by Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis, whether it's, now I will say cystic fibrosis seems to be actually a genetic defect that seems to be different than a lot of the autoimmune conditions. Right. But name some more. I'm drawing blanks here when I know a million of them. I can't think of any of them offhand.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
Rheumatoid arthritis is caused by Klebsiella dysbiosis and Saul's alkalizing spondylitis. I've coached many people with both RA and AS into remission just by reducing Klebsiella and have them going on diets that are low in resistant starch. So those are two diseases that, if you look at the literature, they're all it does play a role with the mutation in HLA-B27. However, that seems to cause your body to be weak to Klebsiella dysbiosis, which Klebsiella is normal to the human body. It is a normal bacteria that's generally found in our digestive tracts and our urinary tracts and our lungs. It's where you get, Klebsiella pneumonia. It can cause pneumonia if it causes dysbiosis. So AS and RA are both caused by Klebsiella. And I've coached many people in a remission, just treating their gut, fixing their gut.
Fair enough. Next question is from Domesday. Is there any important info on reasons for developing lactose intolerance in your mid-20s?
Usually by then, it's not some sort of genetical issue with the digestion of lactose and the lack of producing, as far as a genetic concern, lack of producing lactase or utilization of lactase. And it's very rare that there's actually a genetic component to lactose intolerant, because one of the main sugars that was in human breast milk is lactose. So if we were not able to ingest it, that would be a major problem genetic-wise from an evolutionary standpoint. Not to say that you can't, there are polymorphisms where you'll produce less lactose, or lactase, should I say, less lactase enzyme to break down lactose. But however, for most people, it usually manifests as a child, if that's the case, compared to later on. Most of the reason why it happens later on is because a person will have some sort of gastrointestinal dysbiosis. Do you recommend getting a ubiome test done? Then consulting with someone, me, Grace Liu, there's a couple of people out there that look at the stool testing. Or you can research it yourself. There's a lot of information out there of how to figure out one's microbiome. But yeah, most of the time it's caused by damage done to the small brush border of the small intestine, and the lack of ability from dysbiosis causing that, and the lack of ability of producing proper lactase to be able to digest it. There have been many cases of people restoring their flora and being able to properly make enough lactase again. I've seen it. I've coached people where it's happened. It's something that can be done. It's way easier than celiac disease, which I have. I also have the genetic markers for celiac disease, HLA-DQ2. Maybe one day if I get my digestive system good enough, because I didn't have celiac forever that I knew of. I developed with my H. pylori dysbiosis when I was about 23. Maybe if I, because my silent reflux is in remission, my health is better than it ever has been, but I still got a long way to go. I mean, I've been sick all my life. I don't expect to flick a switch and be healthy overnight. Right. So one thing a lot of people got to learn is once you're chronically ill, there ain't no magic pill I can get. Once the straw has broken the camel's back, there's not a magical pill I can give you that reverses it just like that.
Yeah, you need to spend as much time as you got into having that condition to get out.
100%. But one day I'm hoping that I can overcome celiac disease. And there are studies to show with celiac that, or even with gluten intolerance, that it may be the glyphosate that is sprayed on wheat. And I have a blog about it on fixyourgut.com about how glyphosate reduces lactobacillus and reduces bifidobacterium. There's many studies of that, as well as the wheat plants themselves have been grown shorter and contain more gluten for more harvesting to be used for bread. Here in the States, we like our more glutinous, vital gluten added to, our doughs for pizza. We're in Europe, it's not so much like that. Like, my ancestry is French, Brisson's my last name. They actually have some of the lowest rates of celiac disease and gluten intolerance in the world, even though they ingest the most amount of bread in Europe and America, as far as first world countries is concerned, as far as their gluten ingestion. And that may be because they don't spray a lot of glyphosate on their wheat. They're actually trying to phase that out. They don't iron fortify their wheat, because there's a big difference between the phytic binded iron that you get in plants and the heme bonded iron that you get in meat, compared to the ferrous sulfate that's put inside many of your fortified products, and the effect that it has on the microbiome and the effect that it has on your health. It can actually damage the mucosal barrier and the lining by creating oxidative stress from the iron, from many different chemicals, whether it's stomach acid reacting to it, or whether later it's bile reacting to it. And there's a simple home experiment you can do at home. Is you could take some Cheerios, you can crunch it up in a plastic, like a Ziploc bag, and take a magnet, and you can extract the iron out of it. Well, imagine what that's doing to your gut. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, that sounds too simple or whatever. But there are studies of how iron supplementation causes a lot of oxidative stress. Look into the work of Morley Robbins. If you're low on iron, it's probably better that you get it from meat consumption or plant-based consumption. Heme-bounded iron is probably better than phytic acid-bounded iron, but both are better than nothing. There is a correlation between supplemental iron and it causing oxidative stress throughout the whole body, as well as copper displacement, lowering of ceruloplasm, and gut inflammation too as well.
Okay. That's wow, I didn't even realize it went that deep with it. But I mean, it makes sense. I mean, especially from an expert intuition standpoint, I mean, the pattern is there and you can see how it all links together. That's why, in my opinion, people need to consider an NE approach to health more so than an SE approach to health, because of how concrete SE, allopathic medicine is. But I do have a question, John.
Yes.
What typically causes a depression? How would you treat depression? And also, how would you treat depression be compared to how allopaths treat depression, especially with the use of psychotropic drugs? And then also, what does the psychotropic drugs do to the gut, and how does it inhibit health and create chronic illness over time?
Okay. First of all, I can't treat anything. First, let's get the terminology right. John doesn't treat. John doesn't diagnose. I don't do any of that stuff.
That's why I brought it up specifically for
That's
you
the first
to
thing.
provide our disclaimer. Yes.
The second thing is light. It's literally light. Now, there are genes that are associated with mental health issues, whether it's issues to methylation, MTHFR, COMT, COMT being catch-all methyltransferase. If you have too much of the enzyme, like I do, you might have more dopamine, so you tend to be a little bit more paranoid, a little bit more anxious. You have too little COMT, you tend to be more depressed because you have low dopamine. You tend to be, less satisfied. So there are genes and polymorphisms in those genes that can. That's why I try to do a fix your gut. It's more than just gut health. It's kind of like the whole approach. It's genes, it's lifestyle, it's diet.
Epigenetics.
Epigenetics, which would be genes, your gut microbiome. It's all of these things put together.
And your brain microbiome, your mouth microbiome, the microbiome in your testicles and your genitalia. Yeah.
No part of the body is sterile. Don't let anybody ever tell you. Don't let anyone ever tell you that there's parts of your body that are sterile. There is no part of your body is sterile. They used to thought the stomach is sterile. It's not. Even at a pH of 1. There's still bacteria that can live there and survive. Some people used to say the brain is sterile. It's not sterile. Okay. Some people will say that the placenta, all that's sterile. It's not. Like Doomsday said, urine's not even sterile. It's not. There's no part of your body that does not contain microbes. For example, schizophrenia, another autoimmune condition. Autoimmune, it's mental health, but it's autoimmune, is caused by toxic plasmosis gondii. And there's enough medical literature for me to say that. Studies, even in
house cats cause schizophrenia.
Even in mainstream. Now, that's the thing is here I'm going to get conspiratorial, then I'll get back to your question. I guess it still proclaims the mental health.
Sure.
So when you take a male who has high testosterone, let's say a Brazilian soccer team. Joe Rogan used to use this analogy. Even though I don't like Joe Rogan, it's still a right analogy. So let's say you take someone who has high T and you give them T gondii. They become extremely aggressive and angry, and anger explosive disorder, and so. That's Joe Rogan's theory of why the Brazilian soccer team is so good at soccer, because they have high testosterone, because of T gondii and aggression and stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, let's take someone who has low testosterone and you give them T gondii. Well, then they actually can develop anxiety and schizophrenic type symptoms and a lack of aggression and a lack of wanting to be manly. So that'll end up happening too. And women tend to have a natural defense to T gondii, which would make sense because you're trying to keep when they tell you a pregnant woman, what is one of the mains of advice that they give you?
Stay away from the cat box. Exactly.
And that's because T gondii can, cause an abortion, spontaneous abortion, or it can affect development of the fetus. So women have a somewhat natural defense to T gondii. That's why the rates of schizophrenia to male to female, there's a huge disproportion ratio. Males are way more likely to get it than females are because they're more protected from T gondii because of that natural innate defense against it. Not to say that they can't get it, and not to say that women can't become schizophrenics. They can. It's just there's a higher difference proportion between the two. So that is one example of microbiome affecting, and genes. There's genes associated, polymorphisms, epigenetics are associated with schizophrenia. But that's one thing that's associated with schizophrenia being T gondii. Now, the question is once T gondii gets into the brain, once it starts propagating in the brain slowly, it's slowly. That's why it takes for years for someone, that's why usually someone develops schizophrenia in their mid-20s, because it takes forever for it to start causing damage within the brain. It's very slow parasite in doing it. It's not very fast. Can it be undone? Maybe. You'd have to try, anti-inflammatory supplements like curcumin, omega-3 fatty acids in the brain to see maybe if that helps, CBD, as well as, tackling the T. gondii dysbiosis within the brain, maybe pepperine, something to try to lower it. Then, yeah, it's a possibility that a person who's schizophrenic, well, a majority of them also have a COMT polymorphism. When I talked about COMT earlier, they usually have a homozygous COMT polymorphism. So they tend to have a very high dopamine. Tackling that too as well can help them recover. So that's an example of, gut and epigenetics being associated with a mental illness like schizophrenia. Now, like we go circling back to depression, there's many different causes to depression. It's epigenetical, like MTHFR or COMT causing undermethylation.
Which you supplement with riboflavin to solve.
Riboflavin and folate if needed, and methylcobalamin, yes. And sunlight exposure for proper dopamine production and proper serotonin production. Because what a lot of people don't realize is serotonin kind of keeps your mood stabilized. It's not really so much of a happy chemical. Dopamine is what makes us happy. It's what makes us feel fulfilled. You're producing dopamine until you achieve that goal. Once you achieve that goal, you no longer produce dopamine. Your dopamine actually drops because it's reward pathway. It's a reward cycle. It's what gets us to do things. It's what gets us to be happy, to feel motivated. It's what dopamine does. It's why people use drugs to increase dopamine all the time, like opioids, because it makes you feel good. Okay. So, but sunlight naturally does it. When, sunlight hits your eye, activates melanopsin, and your body starts saying, okay, it's daylight, so I need to produce the alert neurotransmitters. I need to produce noradrenaline. I need to produce dopamine. I need to produce serotonin. I need to produce histamine. These are the things that will keep you awake during the day. These are your go neurotransmitters. These are also the neurotransmitters, majority of them, that make you happy and stabilize your mood. So many people, you probably have heard of seasonal affective disorder. That's because they're not getting enough sunlight. They're not getting enough sunlight exposed to their eyes. They're getting artificial sunlight from different types of artificial lighting. I have incandescent up here. That is the best lighting that you can get that does not affect the circadian rhythm as much. The color temperature is 2,700 Kelvin for standard incandescent. That's a warm light. If you ever looked at a fluorescent lighting as far as the color spectrum, the visible light spectrum, it looks like something out of Mars. High peaks and valleys. It looks horrible. Horrible. It looks nothing like the sun. Incandescent is kind of like the reverse of the sun as far as its color index as a visible light spectrum, but that's still better than these horrendous peaks and valleys that you see. As well as a lot of the artificial light too, flickers. LED, flickers. Fluorescent, flickers. And your eye might not see it, but your brain's registering it. So it's been hooked up a lot, with causing mental health issues. It's been possibly could trigger seizures, epilepsy, headaches. But incandescent does not do that. Incandescent lighting is constant because it's the heat of a filament. So it's not blinking on and off like it would be with the LED, like it would be with fluorescent lighting. So Emily asked, I guess to finish the train of thought, what about someone who has seasonal affective disorder? Go outside. Even if it's cold, go outside. Now, if you live in a place where it's cloudy all year round, then you might want to invest in some type of full spectrum light. But if it's not, and it's just cold, go out and just get the sun on your face. Just get the sun on your face when you can. If you can't, they sell full spectrum lights. They sell SAD lights that you can turn on for a few minutes in the mornings, and they said to help. Now, nothing's better than the sun. They've done multiple studies on that because it makes sense. We can't mimic anything as far as the color spectrum of the sun yet, and as far as the individual ratios of like infrared light, for example, and visible light and ultraviolet light. We can't replicate it completely yet of what the sun is able to give us. Our body naturally reacts to the sun, whether if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint or whether you look at it from a creationist standpoint. The body reacts to the sun way differently than would ever react to any artificial light that we can produce as of yet. So sun is always going to be best, even to those lights where you can get a full spectrum, a full visible spectrum. Probably has a high dose of blue light in the majority of the time. That will help produce dopamine, will help produce serotonin, and will help produce norepinephrine, because that's what blue light does. Blue light exposure to the melanopsin in our eyes sets off a whole cascade to do that. So when you're in the dark at night, when you're supposed to be producing melatonin and GABA, and you're sitting here and you have your phone, you're in the dark, and you're looking at your phone. Now, if you notice, my phone's red. I know it glows, but you can see it's red, okay? That's because I have an app on my phone called Twilight, and I can change the color temperature, okay? I can make it even more redder, which I do at night. And I can make the light more blue, which I don't ever do. But that's the normal. This is without it on. This is without it on. See how blue that light is? That's ridiculous. You're staring at the sun at dark. People want to know why they have depression, want to know why they have weight gain issues, want to know why they have cancer. Melatonin is one of the strongest antioxidants your body produces. That's why third shift workers have higher rates of cancers like nurses, because they produce less melatonin. There's studies to prove this. But your doctor won't tell you that. Light is one of the biggest things. Grounding is another thing. Human beings, there are some research about us being photoelectric beings, and that we may gain some energy from exposing our body to the sun, as well as exposing our body by grounding to the earth in and of itself. I know that sounds woo-woo, but think about it. We are electrochemical beings. We also produce our own electromagnetic field. There's one around you. There's one around me. Your heart's producing it. Your heart's producing it. Heart is electrochemical pump. So a lot of people don't realize that all that we're exposed to, whether it's the non-native electromagnetic frequencies from cell phones, whether it's from Wi-Fi. And now, is 5G going to end the world? No. Will it make some people sicker who are more sensitive to it and cause issues for people to some degree further than 4G? Yes, it will. It will. I don't think it'll be safer. They claim it'll be safer because there's a shorter distance, but usually to get into the building, there has to be a repeater to strengthen the signal. So that's the thing is in our modern life, there's comforts. I have a cell phone, I have a computer, I'm talking to you on it now, but a lot of people aren't aware of how these things are slowly poisoning us.
Right.
And how they're slowly making us ill, how they're slowly, for mental health. If we're exposed to light at night when we're not supposed to, and not enough melatonin and GABA are being produced, which GABA is the slow down neurotransmitter. It's the one that makes us feel calm. It activates our vagus nerve. It activates our parasympathetic nervous system. Most people are walking around with an overactive sympathetic nervous system. If you get that wired and tired feeling where you feel keyed up and you can't relax, you have an overactive sympathetic nervous system. You got too much adrenaline going through you. You need to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. There's many different ways of doing that. Grounding outside barefoot and getting sun is one. Humming is one. Prayer is one. Meditating is one. Gargling is one way. Trauma release exercise is another. Having sex is one way. Those are all ways to activate the parasympathetic nervous system so that your body can calm itself down more in the high stress world that we live in. It's paramount because a lot of us are running ourselves into the ground and our sympathetic nervous system is always activated. And that's one thing, a negative, Chase, you can attest to this. It's one thing negative a ketogenic diet will do to some people where their body cannot sustain it is it will cause an overactive sympathetic nervous system. And it will cause them, because when you are in ketosis, your body needs to produce two things in great need to maintain it: adrenaline and cortisol. And cortisol is this main stress hormone, and adrenaline is going to wire you up. So that's why most people are like, yeah, I'm in ketosis, everything's sharp and clear and contrast. Well, yeah, the fight or flight response, when you're running from your life from a tiger, the leaves look sharp and contrast too as well, So that's what it is. And for some people, they can sustain it. If they're in good health, They take care of themselves. They're doing ketosis right. And males could tend to tolerate it better than others because testosterone, from an anthropological standpoint, men fast more. We went on the hunt. And because of that, testosterone kind of blocks it. You know, testosterone and estrogen both have their benefits and their negatives, okay? I'm going to, since I'm saying the benefits for the guys, a benefit for estrogen for women is that it makes you more resilient to pain and it makes your immune systems function better. Those colds that you see us, those little mild colds that you may have gotten sick with your significant other, if they are male, is in the bed, you know, dying from it, but you had it and you got over it and you're feeling, you know, you're like, why is he so sick? You know, men are so weak and stuff like that. Well, estrogen is an immune booster. Testosterone is not really. So that is why men tend, when they get sick and then are in pain, tend not to react as well. It's because of that. So I think did I answer the question about mental health, or did I get in rambling? I'm sorry. I'm prone to ramble. If I do, Chase, interrupt me. If I'm rambling, interrupt me. Okay, don't worry about that.
It's all good.
Okay. Chase, I lost you. I can't hear you.
No, it's fine. I'm also on the phone at the same time, John. Sorry.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm anything. I don't know everything. There are some diseases that I'll have to look up, but if anybody has any questions about what they want to do.
So, John, I could see something like Kana says, I need to produce histamine. My body can't even get rid of the histamine that's already present. And Emily says, what about for someone who has SAD? It's cloudy all winter here.
I answered Emily on SCDs.
Okay, cool.
I think. For Kana, okay, that one is tough, but I think I can answer that one.
All right.
So that one's a multi-level question. So there's two enzymes that break down histamine in the body. One is diamine oxidase, is produced in the small intestine. The other is HNMT, which methylates histamine, and that's produced in the brain. So you have to increase both of those, but it depends on what your issue is. If you're breaking out in the hives and getting allergies and stuff like that, you probably don't produce enough diamine oxidase. If you're having sleeping issues and anxiety issues and migraines, you probably don't produce enough HNMT to methylate the histamine properly to get rid of it. So that's two things that you want to look into, is increasing HNMT, which is usually just proper methylation, is one. And two is looking into, as far as going on a low histamine diet. So you want to take in as little histamine as you possibly can. Melanie Avalon has a good guide of foods that are high histamine. I can give a couple of brief ones of those. Those would be your canned fish, because fish have a lot of the amino acid L-histidine. So bacteria can, when fish spoils or if fish is sitting in a can over time, there's going to be some conversion of L-histidine into histamine. That's why you can get a condition called scromboid poisoning from the ingestion of spoiled seafood, because it has a lot of histamine in it. So a person will flush and have asthma and allergies for a short period of time because of that. So you want to stay away from canned seafood. You want to stay from anything fermented, any type of fermented food. You want to stay away from chocolate, because chocolate is fermented through processing. You want to stay away from high histamine foods that naturally produce histamine, like strawberries, spinach, avocados, citrus fruits. Cured meat is another one. Aged cheese is probably the highest in histamine. Fresh cheese is fine in some cases, but aged cheese is really high in histamine. There's probably more, but those are the main foods that you want to avoid when it comes to histamine. And so I'd look into a low histamine diet. So you want to, because with histamine, it goes like this. There's some people like me who I had histamine issues as a child. I was histamine intolerant. So my cup was small. And the more, okay, so when you eat food, your stomach produces histamine, so you got to fill up that cup. When you eat histamine foods, you got to fill up that cup further. When you get sun, especially UVA, which is morning sun or winter sun compared to afternoon sun, and during the summer, which is primary UVB, you got to fill up that cup. When you get bit by a mosquito or an insect, you got to fill up that cup. So you're filling up that cup, and once that cup spills over, you have an allergic reaction, okay? So for you, that cup's smaller than the average person. The average person has like a normal cup, like a 16-ounce cup. There are some people who are over-methylators, which is what I turned into when at H. pylori I had hydrogen sulfide. I had issues where my cup was too big, Okay, so there's no amount of histamine would fill up that cup for me. I switched, which has its own negatives, like systemic inflammation and thyroid issues and stuff. But anyway, you have to try to minimize as much as that cup is filling up by reducing the amount of histamine foods that you're ingesting. Try to avoid direct exposure to early morning sun or winter sun. You need some, but you need to reduce the amount because it will produce histamine. Those are things that you can do. Supplemental wise, vitamin C is a good antihistamine, but all that's doing is just blocking histamine. It's not degrading it and getting rid of it. All it's doing is blocking the ability for histamine to act on the cells and on the neurons. So it does not work as a thing to degrade histamine. Quercetin works good as a mast cell stabilizer. It protects, it keeps the mast cells from becoming unstabilized and producing a lot of histamine, which could trigger allergic reactions. But quercetin can have some issues for some people where it can increase anxiety. If it does, you probably have a catch-all methyltransferase mutation, like I mentioned earlier, and your dopamine is too low. Magnesium supplementation is very good for histamine issues. Nettle tea is very good for histamine issues. Licorice, if you can tolerate licorice, DGL, it's very good for histamine issues. Ginger is very good for histamine. All of those tend to stabilize the mast cells. But yeah, the methylation, undermethylation, you need to look up undermethylation. Undermethylation goes very much in tune with histamine intolerance. Also, there are bacteria in the gut. You probably have bacteria in your digestive tract that are producing too much histamine. And a lot of probiotics that you take can produce histamine, like Lactobacillus reuteri, for example. So you have to be careful. Just Google histamine intolerance on my blog on www.fixyourgut.com. It should come up with an article on histamine. Google histamine and self-hacked, histamine and undermethylation, histamine and the root cause protocol by Morley Robbins. And all of those should help you kind of get in the right direction. That should help with histamine issues. Does anybody else have any questions or anything that you guys would like to discuss? You're welcome. Hopefully I was helpful and pointed you in the right direction. Histamine intolerance is a very difficult thing to get rid of, but it can be done. I've coached many people who have gotten over their asthma and their allergies. And I had one guy, his histamine intolerance was so severe that he would break out into hives when he got into the wind, when he got a wind exposure. Ironically enough, he lived in Chicago, which is the windy city. So it really sucked for him. But he did get better, and it wasn't that bad where wind was triggering hives to pop up on his skin, which is very bad. I think Chase wanted to talk about politics for a minute, which is a very decisive issue.
Yes. So one more health question, though.
Yes.
Talk to us about cancer and cancer that likes glucose versus cancer that does not, and what does that mean, et cetera. Just a little bit. I've always wanted to know a little bit more about that.
Okay, so cancer, there's multiple causes of cancer. It's part of the world that we live in. That's increased its amount of it occurring. I don't think it's because of diagnostic processes are the reason why, more cancer is being diagnosed every year. But so with cancer, there seems to be two dominant types of cancer cells. It's probably more, but the two we know of is they either prefer glucose or they prefer L-glutamine. We haven't found one that prefers both yet. So you've heard of probably a lot of people trying ketogenic diets for cancer. And that would work very, very well in someone who has cancer cells that prefer glucose, that thrive off of glucose. Because in a ketogenic diet, you're not taking any glucose and very little any at all, especially if you're doing a 0 to low carb diet properly. So that might be the reason why for ketogenic diets, for some people, their cancer shrinks or goes in remission. However, if the cancer cells prefer L-glutamine to glucose, then a ketogenic diet, which is very, very heavy in L-glutamine because you're eating a lot of meat. Of course, L-glutamine's in a lot of things too, like cabbage and stuff like that, but meat is a very good source of L-glutamine, which is a very, very important amino acid for cellular regulation and muscle repair and everything. Right. But it'll start metastasizing worse. So for those people, a vegan diet like the Gerson therapy, which I know there's some, consequences with the Gerson therapy. Some people have died under it because nothing's perfect. That may be better for those people. So that seems to be the difference between the. Now you're going to ask, well, how do I determine? Currently, unless you live next to a research hospital and they're looking into this, you won't know. You won't know until you try one or the other. And you start to see if your cancer starts to shrink or if it starts to further metastasize. For most people, I'd probably recommend doing a ketogenic diet. Of course, very healthy, eating grass-fed meat, stay away from GMOs, stay organic if all possible, pastured meat, But, there's other things to cancer too as well, more than just that. A person should possibly be supplementing with CBD, maybe Rick Simpson oil if it's legal in the area that you live, which would be THC CBD combination. Proper sunlight exposure, circadian rhythm, and mitochondrial function is paramount because cancer cells, they don't commit apoptosis like they should. Their mitochondria do not die like they should. Their cells do not die. You're making cancer. Everybody in this chat right now has cancer in them. All of you do. Your body's making it right now. But the difference between you and someone who has a metastasis that's growing, some grow slow, some grow fast, is that your immune system killed those cells, or those cells, through their own design, committed apoptosis. They die. Harry Carey. They commit suicide. So that's the difference between a healthy cell and a cancerous cell. Those cells, the immune system either does not eliminate or the body does not kill. So they metastasize. They pretty much replicate. A cancer cell is a damaged cell. The mitochondria in them are damaged. The cell is damaged. So they replicate when they're, okay, I take that back. Sometimes they're damaged, sometimes they're not damaged. Sometimes they're just cells where they're not supposed to be. Like Barrett's esophagus, for example, showing being more cellular composition of the duodenum instead of the esophagus. That's why it causes esophageal cancer, because your esophagus starts to look like your duodenum cellularly instead of the esophagus itself. So it could be that your body decides to do that because Barrett's esophagus is caused by bile reflux. So it kind of, your body's like, hey, how do I protect against bile? Oh yeah, I make more duodenal epithelial cells. And well, that's not supposed to be here. It's supposed to be here. And so because it's not supposed to be here, it starts causing oxidative stress and other issues, and cancer starts to develop, majority from Barrett's esophagus. So cancer in and of itself, there's many different causes. It's not a one-size-fits-all type thing. That's why chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, conventional treatment, they kind of treat it as a one-size-fits-all to some degree, but then they don't. There's many different drugs that are used for certain cancers. They're used for others. Some cancers use the HRAS pathway, some don't. But so with everybody with cancer, there's not one size fits all. Even naturally, there isn't. You have to keep trying certain things. Proper circadian rhythm, proper sunlight exposure, clean water ingestion, proper diet, all those things should help reduce cancer metastasis. But in of themselves are probably not strong enough to do so. A person may have to do Rick Simpson oil. A person may have to do photobiomodulation therapy. Some people might have to do Rife therapy. Some people might have to use curcumin at high doses. I don't usually recommend latril, which is amygdalin, which is apricot seeds. I think there's more efficient things that can be used instead of that. I do think there's a lot of pseudoscience in the natural health field too. I have talked about them a lot on my YouTube channel and a lot of my blogs. There are a lot of garbage supplements and a lot of garbage things that are pushed, like kinesiology, for example, live blood cell analysis. These are things that have no scientific basis. Just like grapefruit seed extract for an antimicrobial agent, majority of it is just triclosan. It's just contamination. It's useless. There's a lot of shoddy stuff in the natural field, just like there's a lot of shoddy stuff in the conventional field. There's a lot of drugs that doctors give all the time, and they don't never read the drug inserts, like ciprofloxacin, for example, a common prescribed antibiotic that's got multiple black box warnings. And most people should take it, should be on mitochondrial support to protect themselves so they don't get floxed. So both sides are equally guilty. Though I do think conventional tends to be more nefarious, where naturopathic tends to be more ignorant based. Not to say that there's the nurses and doctors are part of this. No, it's the head up of the pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharmaceutical, for example, and the Sackler family, them knowing that OxyContin was addicting, even though they still pushed it and said that it wasn't. My father, who had Hep C, who got it from taking heroin in the 70s, went back to using because he was told OxyContin was not addicting in the mid to late 1990s. And he went back on it thinking he would not become addicted to it. And he became addicted, went right back to using again because of that. And so it wasn't the drug reps that worked for Purdue. It wasn't the majority of the doctors that were prescribing it. It wasn't the nurses that were giving it out. They didn't know any better. No, it was the Sackler family and the head bigwigs at Purdue Pharmaceutical that knew how addicting OxyContin was and kept it from the general public. So I do think that it tends to be more nefarious in the heads up of pharmaceutical industry and the conventional medicine, and more ignorance on the naturopathic side. Not to say that there isn't some scams out there that are nefarious, like the Kempkins diet that a lot of people were using to lose weight, and the woman knew that it didn't work and it was dangerous, but she still put it out there. It's still there too. Both sides are guilty of it. I've called both sides out on it for sure. Science-based medicine says that it's science-based. It is not in a lot of ways. And they claim that naturopathy is not science-based. In a lot of ways, it is. And it'll be proven in the future that we need a combination of the two to properly treat many health issues that we have currently today.
All right. All right, so I guess let's thank you for your answers
James?
regarding health. Yes.
Could I ask one more question before we move on?
Yeah,
Yes,
Trey,
yes,
go
of
ahead.
course.
Any question?
I was wondering, I may be completely screwed here and not get a good answer, but I was wondering, what would be a good lightweight diet that was well balanced that you could eat while backpacking?
Talk about if you're going camping?
More like months in the mountains.
Okay.
Stopping with like a week's supply of food that you can't really refrigerate or preserve.
Are you doing any foraging?
Not really. I mean, if it's not something I want to rely on, it's not
Okay.
something I can rely on really.
I would recommend a lot of dried fruit because that'll survive.
Okay.
Dried meat. You could probably do individual sealed. It depends if you're preparing it yourself. You could probably maybe get away with a lot of dried meat. This is pretty much what you're pretty much going to be based off is just dried food. Your vegetables aren't really going to survive very long. They'll survive for a couple of days. That won't be refrigerated. You could take with you. I wouldn't buy just the conventional stuff. I would just buy a dehydrator and just make it yourself. It's a lot healthier if you do it that way. And then just store it properly, seal it, maybe get a vacuum sealer and seal it. But dried meat, dried fruit, you can't, you're not really bringing a cooler with you. So there's not really much I can think of that you can do. You could bring some bananas with you.
Yeah.
They would survive and they would be nutrient dense, full of potassium. Make sure you get yourself a really good quality salt, like real salt, and bring that with you. That'll give you a lot of nutrients. Make sure for emergency water that you get those straws that have the water filters in them. They seem to work very well. I wish I could think of anything else, but offhand, nuts would work very well. It would be nutritious. I prefer organic, but they would also work, that you would be able to live off of them. I don't know how well you'd be able to, I guess you wouldn't really be able to bring a can of nuts. You'd have to put mixed nuts in a big bag, you know, but they would give you a
Yeah.
lot of good fats, a lot of good protein that would help you be more, feel more full. So, I would recommend doing that. You could also carry,
Okay.
they have packets, individual packets of coconut oil now. You could carry those as well to give you a good boost of energy for the medium chain triglycerides, as well as get in some healthy fats. So that could also be something you can do, Tran, as well. They also sell ghee packets as well, which would give you healthy fats within the ghee too. So you could do that. That could be another thing that you would be able to do. I think that's probably about it. I can't think of any vegetables that you could take that would not be perishable, of stuff that you want to eat. I don't think I don't think you want to cut open an onion. But if you can think of anything, hopefully I was able to help you out, man. I wish I.
Yeah, for sure. It's good information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Anyone else have any questions for John before we move on to the next topic? Okay, hold on. We got one. Domesday says, you mentioned kombucha being a great fermented food for the microbiome. I do homebrew mead from honey, and I was wondering what herbs I could add to make it especially nutritious in terms of vitamins and minerals.
That's an excellent question. Most of the herbs I'm going to recommend, I don't know if they would kill the fermentation that you're trying to do. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do for taste too. If we're looking at it strictly from a health standpoint, you'd probably want to add in basil. We wouldn't have too much of a strong antimicrobial effect to kill off the fermentation, even though you're probably adding it afterwards, probably. Basil, thyme and oregano are very strong antimicrobial. I wouldn't recommend it. Also have a very sharp taste. Oh, that's a good question. I'd have to think. Oh, basil comes to mind. Ceylon cinnamon, ginger. I can't really think of anything else. Doomsday, message me at jonathanfixture.com. Send me an email. I'll try to get, if I can think of anything else, I'll try to. Basil's very healthy. I know that. Cinnamon. I'm just trying to think of other herbs. Clove. But then clove is antimicrobial. Probably St. John's wort is the hyperfolin in it. It does have an SSRI effect, which is why I generally would not recommend adding it. I'm not a fan of SSRIs. I think it circled back to one of Chase's questions of how drugs affect the microbiome. There's many studies that SSRIs actually, because you'll hear a quote where a lot of, most of your body's serotonin is produced in the gut by your bacteria, and it is, but that serotonin never crosses the blood-brain barrier. If it did, you'd have major problems. That's why you supplement with 5-HTP and L-tryptophan, or you ingest L-tryptophan to produce serotonin. It's produced within the brain. It's not produced. The serotonin that your gut's producing is used to push. Serotonin is a muscle contractor, okay? Abundance many functions as a neurotransmitter, so it contracts muscle. So it's used to push. Bacteria produces it, your gut produces it through the emotocraphin cells. So it produces it to do motility. So SSRIs actually, you think they would increase motility. Well, the studies have actually shown, since it reduces the amount of serotonin, or increases the amount of serotonin that's in the brain, should I say, somehow or another it decreases the amount that's in the gut. I haven't quite, maybe it's effect on the endochromaffin cells, I don't know. But it actually can cause constipation. And so usually I don't recommend SSRIs. They're bad for digestion. Paxil, Prozac, Zoloft. I do think, I don't like SNRIs either. Their effects are way, we'd have to do another stream on that to talk about antidepressants, Chase. There is one that I do recommend that I do think does have clinical value, and that is, Wellbutrin. Now, it can't be the generic. The generic for years, people would say it would not work. They contacted the FDA. They found out that was an issue down there. And the Caribbean, where it was being produced, that they just were not producing it properly. So I would not trust a generic Wellbutrin. But the actual medication Wellbutrin of itself, the non-generic form, may have some benefits to some people. I'm not necessarily against it. As far as depression, especially people with severe depression or people with borderline personality disorder, it may have a lot of benefit. But of course, run by your doctor. I'm not saying start popping Wellbutrin or anything. But as far as antidepressant medication, antipsychotic medications, it tends to be one of the better ones. So I'm not anti-medicine completely. There are some benefits to some medicine, and I do write about that on my blog. It's just medicine should be used right. It's just like supplements should be used right. That's all.
Fair enough. Okay. Unless there's any other health questions for John, I kind of want to take this into a political space because John is actually a political researcher as well. It's his other passion outside of health. And John, I really want to get your opinion on or your thoughts on the current, American election, and then also maybe Alan Dershowitz, because Titus had asked me to discuss Alan Dershowitz with you, at least from a psychological standpoint, because we're thinking about doing a how to type session.
I need you to type Alan Dershowitz.
Yeah, yeah, you know what type Alan Dershowitz is. Okay, so for everyone, who is Alan Dershowitz, and what is he best known for? And whatnot?
You really want to do this? Are you sure? I'm bound to probably piss off majority. Okay, I myself am apolitical. I don't believe.
Oh, O.J. Simpson. Corey Trevor wants to know about O.J. Simpson.
Yes, he was O.J. Simpson's lawyer as long as Kardashian was. I myself am apolitical in that the left-right paradigm, Republican, Democrat. We're talking about U.S. politics. They're both screwed, in my opinion. They're both screwed.
So T.I. Hero does not mean that Republican Democrat is real.
Now, I voted for John Trump in 2016. It was the biggest mistake in my entire life. I regret it. I said I would never vote for the president beforehand, and boy, was I wrong. He fooled me, and I was dumb, and I'll never again. But I just want to show you where I was, and I am conservative generally in my beliefs. I was raised a conservative. And a lot of my beliefs, I am, as a Christian too, I'm pro-life, even though I don't think abortion should ever be overruled, because from a moral standpoint, I think abortion is wrong. From an ethical standpoint, I think abortion is wrong. From a moral standpoint, you can't ever make it illegal, at least in my opinion. But so I just want to, see where I come from. I am conservative in a lot of my beliefs. That being said, I rag on both the Republicans as much as I do the Democrats. I cannot stand either side. I think there is no candidate for us currently, or ever was there. And so how Alan Dershowitz plays in all this. Alan Morton Dershowitz is a famous lawyer. He's a famous free speech advocate. And you'll see him around. He's been in many famous trials, O.J. Simpson being the biggest one that he's mostly known for. He's a political pundit. He was pro-Trump. He still is, even though he is a liberal. And my biggest issues with Alan Dershowitz, and it's a pretty big one, in my opinion, is that he was involved with Jeffrey Epstein. Do you all know who Jeffrey Epstein is, or do I have to? Have you heard about Jeffrey Epstein in the news? The alleged pedophile sex trafficker who is a multi-billionaire who has connections to both Hillary Clinton and John Trump equally. But anyway, Al Morton Dershowitz was allegedly molested a woman named Virginia Roberts, who's now her name is Virginia Roberts Giuffre. And she was sex trafficked from Mar-a-Lago, where majority of Jeffrey Epstein got his clients for his sex trafficking, and his sexual pimp network was from Mar-a-Lago. And Dershowitz had molested Virginia Roberts when she was underage, was forced to. And I can't stand the man. He's disgusting to me, based off of her allegations, and she has never wavered. He claims that she's a liar. Mike Cernovich claims that she's a liar. Mike Cernovich used to be Alan Dershowitz's lawyer, claims that she is a slut. Both of them do. I believe her testimony. It adds up. It adds up with all that we know from the Jeffrey Epstein case. I believe that she is telling the truth. And she's still currently, she's been suing them and off and on legal battles with them for years. And she is currently suing Alan Morton Dershowitz for defamation. And we'll see what happens because of that trial. But the Miami Herald has been investigating the Jeffrey Epstein case, as well as Dershowitz. And hopefully justice will be served. Jeffrey Epstein was given the sweetheart deal by Alexander Acosta, who is Trump's currently Secretary of Labor. And in doing so, he saw very little jail time, if any. I got to spend most of that time that he was convicted for at his home. He only had to spend 2 or 3 hours a day in jail, if that. So yeah, he never paid for his crime for the international underage sex trafficking organization that he was running. That has both Clinton and Trump both involved in it. Republicans and Democrats both involved in it in the highest order. Hope I summed up Epstein perfectly. If Corey Trevor's in the chat, he can tell me whether or not I did. But
no, that's fine. It's just kind of really interesting to me, given Trump being in the news. I mean, even our mutual friend Jason mentioned that Trump was actually falsely accused of rape again for the umpteenth time today. So
I don't know if it's falsely. I used to say
really. All right, fair enough. Break it down for me, John. That sounds interesting.
I mean, there are pictures of Virginia Roberts with Jose Maxwell, which is the daughter of the medium Baron Robert Maxwell, and Prince Andrew. I can show you the pictures right now. I mean, I can put it in chat. You guys can look for yourself. Virginia Roberts Giuffre has allegations that Trump. I don't want to get too risque or too lewd, but that Trump molested her and gave specific details because Trump is a germaphobe. This was back in the late 90s. I mean, not like late 2000s, that Trump would require her to wear gloves, like latex gloves.
That's a little weird.
So, yeah. So I do think that Trump is not, I don't think he's not clean. He's just as dirty as Clinton was, as far as the allegations against Bill Clinton are concerned.
There's tons of allegations. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Clinton family because when you look at 9/11, 2012 with the Benghazi incident and, Vile Rat, aka Sean Smith, being killed at the consulate there, not exactly an ideal situation. And this is why I refuse to vote for Hillary Clinton, because she testified before Congress and saying, in terms of Sean Smith's death, a former friend of mine saying, quote, "What difference does it make? I lost all respect for Clinton and had to move on. There's no way I was going to support that kind of person, especially in a political campaign. There's no way, So
and they're both involved with Epstein. Clinton and Trump are both equally involved. I used to argue back in the day when I was a pro-Trumper that Trump had no involvement with Epstein. It could be further from the truth. If you do the research, it's all there. You can look up Waterbury, Wayne Madison's work on it. What's his name? The Conscious Resistance work on it. His name escapes me. The Antidotes work on Epstein, podcast on YouTube. Ed Opperman's work on Epstein. Derek Brose is the Conscious Resistance. All their work on Epstein. My work on Epstein on my conspiracy channel, we've read the documents. Where I'm actually reading the documents. I actually read the Virginia Giuffre allegations against Alan Morton Dershowitz. I read the whole entire 30-something pages on it.
Wow.
It's all there. I read it. So it's there. It doesn't matter who wins. We're all under the thumb of the world order. in that regard.
So it's pretty documented then, is what you're saying, you know, and your TI hero is like going through all that information. If you don't mind, like what is that? Do you have a link to that podcast? You know, maybe we could share that here.
Oh yeah. I mean, multiple links on stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it's really nice because, like, you know, it's important, you know, to me that, you know, people understand that, like, you know, as an NTP like you, John, we have to do our best, you know, verification for TI, but also from an NE standpoint, keep an open mind as much as we can, and, you know, in terms of like understanding like where we're going as a society, where we're going as a world, basically, for these types of things, and really just like try to identify, you know, hey, what is actually happening out there. And then, you know, eventually it's going to get really necessary, especially like, you know, with this community, as we're building this movement from a psychology standpoint, and we're literally going to be, you know, potentially ego hacking and psychoanalyzing, you know, political candidates during campaigns, and then creating content and memes about them that really actually exposes their character and their personality on a public forum. And then people will come to realize, okay, hey, maybe I don't actually want TI Trickster to be my political candidate. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of cognitive biases that go around, you know, with these types of things. But then after you identify or make those identifications with the available political candidates, you might wake up one day and realize, you know, okay, look, you know, Americans, for example, you know, and we have the right to elect and the right to election, but we do not have the right to selection. We don't get to select the candidate pool. We just get to pick from those candidates. And I've been, you know, training this audience on the concept of the Xanatos Gambit. And that's literally what every political election is. It's a Xanatos Gambit. We don't get to choose the candidates that are put forward, but we get to choose of the candidates that are chosen for us, basically.
Well, I'd argue
that's
that
the problem.
I'd argue that we don't even get that.
Say again?
I'd argue that we don't even get to choose that.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Well, hold on. I got, for anyone who says that ritual abuse does not exist, you know, like Epstein or sex trafficking or whatever from a grand scale, this book was written just from the narrative that it, you know, that it is backed up through many court cases and everything. Like, this is a scholarly book. This is not a conspiracy book. There's no like Pizzagate or anything like that. There's nothing. This is based off of, you know, court documents and scholarly research and everything. But like, this guy doesn't even believe standard conspiracy theories at all. Like, he's an academic. It does exist. So Epstein, you know, piling around with all these rich people and running this network, and the Clintons being involved and Trump being involved and everything, it's all well documented by multiple sources. It's all there. And so, you know, I thought Trump was better. I thought I was voting for the lesser of two evils. When we get down to it, I wasn't at all. I was fooled.
Right. And wasn't it because you had discovered who Trump's mentor actually was, or something
Roy
like
Cohn.
that? Roy Cohn, right? And Roy Cohn was linked to Epstein, right? If I remember correctly.
No, Roy Cohn was way dead before Epstein.
Oh, okay.
Roy Cohn was part of the McCarthy area. He was McCarthy's lawyer.
McCarthy's lawyer.
He would run he ran like a brownstone operation, a pedophile blackmail ring. It was one of the bases from it back in the day.
So a pedophile blackmail ring is basically, you know, someone sex traffics young children, basically sets up a politician to have sexual relations with those children, and then films or takes photos of it to grab blackmail evidence, and then uses that evidence to potentially blackmail those politicians into doing whatever they want in terms of political voting. Is that what that is?
To some degree. Another book was called The Franklin Cover-Up by former Nebraska State Senator John DeCamp. This is the most well-known indication of it that's been documented. This book is thoroughly sourced, thoroughly documented, of the life and crimes of Lawrence E. King and the Republican Party at that time. Everybody says about the Clinton Foundation and their crimes, but never talk about this. So it goes both sides. And these books aren't, you know, written by, like, John DeCamp was a Nebraskan state senator. Like, he was somebody. You know, It wasn't like, you know, some guy making YouTube videos in their shed like me, you know. But I try to source. I read, you know, read these materials and stuff, you know. But for people who do care about credentials, you know, Rusty Chet is a PhD. It's published by Oxford University Press. He's a professor at Brown University. It's not like he's just some nobody, And John DeCamp was a state senator, Nebraska state senator for many, 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 many years. So again, it wasn't like he's a nobody either.
Right. It's just so interesting. Like, I haven't actually had the opportunity to read these books or actually delve into it because, like probably the rest of us here on the conference, we're very busy lives because, we're too busy enjoying how our dollar is continually devalued on a regular basis, so that we end up losing buying power, which forces us to work harder and work more hours. So we can't actually enjoy life or even do anything, like potentially challenge the system or think freely, because we're too busy trying to recover our buying power at all moments of the time, and simultaneously dealing with a high divorce rate, which is also created as a result of losing that buying power. Gotta love how that works, but I mean, it'd be nice if there was a such thing as a breadwinner, but there isn't. Now, like, technically every adult in the home has to work. And yet all of a sudden everyone says, oh, that's because of feminism. I'm like, well, no, it's actually because the dollar is basically worthless and lost 1,000% of its value since it was first introduced. The greenback was first introduced after Woodrow Wilson's Jekyll Island incident, and now we have the Federal Reserve. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is that, like, there's all sorts of information. And John, like, given your dedication, as a TI hero, as an INTP, as everything that you've looked into health, would you say that all of your political research, because you are a political science researcher, would you say that you put the same level of passion into your political science research that you do also with your health research and whatnot, from that standpoint?
Yeah, very much so. As much as I've read, thousands, if not tens of thousands of PubMed articles, I've read just as many books, some very old. I own very old books too. I own some books that are out of print about certain subjects, like, Children of God book that's written by Davis, one of the daughters, that was David Berg's daughter. So I put just as much, and I'm not going to say that I get it right all the time. A few years ago, I thought Trump was our guy, and I didn't know about the Council for National Policy, which is the right version of the Council on Foreign Relations. I had no idea that it existed. They controlled majority of the truther movement. I had no idea about that. And so because of that, you're always growing, you're always learning, you make mistakes. Same with health. I've gone back and forth. I used to thought colostrum didn't have a lot of medical usage and was inactivated by stomach acid, the proline-rich peptides. Studies have shown in the past couple of years it's not true. So that's how you can usually judge someone as far as their ability of whether or not you can trust them, is whether or not that they are not ashamed to admit when they're wrong. And very few people are ashamed to admit when they're wrong. And I'll admit when I'm wrong. And I've been wrong many times. And I continue to be wrong many times. I'm human. But admitting that you're wrong and, staying up to date as much as you possibly can with what you're studying, that's what matters.
Right. Sorry, I'm sending a text.
So if anybody is out there, just research what you can. Realize that things really are not going to change. Just be there for your family. Try to build a community, with your neighbors. Try to be there for one another. Try to ground and try to be more out in nature, and a lot of this stuff, even the conspiracy side, even with all the research and all the knowledge that I have and the knowledge that I try to get, or knowledge that anybody has, it's not really going to really change anything in the grand scheme of things.
Well, I mean, what about this, John? Would you consider, like, us knowing Jungian analytical psychology to the level that we do, to give us the opportunity to really understand our neighbors, love our neighbor as ourselves, and develop a newer, heightened sense of community, more so than we ever have before, potentially? And then adding that, that sense of community, that sense of togetherness, that sense of common loyalty, common mutual respect for our fellow man within our communities, and have that, in conjunction with, the political science knowledge, as well as even your health knowledge and whatnot. Do you really think that we could actually create a sub-community that could maintain its own power as a faction within, like, a municipality or a community or a city or a state, potentially, such that it basically becomes its own entity, that would demand the respect of its neighbors as well. I would imagine that we'd be able to achieve that.
I don't think they would ever allow something like that to get big. It'd probably be co-opted. But if you have minor groups working to that same objective, like their own group that we have on Discord, then yeah, it's definitely possible.
Well, I mean, there's tons of people groups, but then again, oftentimes, like especially when it comes to Discord servers, you always have the argument like, oh, hey, people are like, oh, it's just like an echo chamber, and
that's not always. That is not true.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of the Discord circles that I'm involved with, yes, there are some echo chambers, and no, there's not, and I really have a lot of respect for the servers that are not echo chambers that actually do have diversity. Like for example, John and I are on a Discord, and we actually have a white Muslim man who regularly participates in the Discord, and that just goes to show you that's not necessarily all about like an echo chamber. It's just that we're able to reach a higher level of understanding of each other and how each other works, and give that mutual love and respect to each other in order to have community.
Supposed to do. You're not supposed to cut somebody off just because they disagree with you. If you do that, then you can't ever have debate. That's one of the worst things you can do to an NTP as well. Is try to silence us, because we will destroy everything you hold dear and enjoy doing it as
yeah.
As much as I'm about to say, there is good with
no thought police from 1984, Mr. John.
I will say this.
And given that as to how much we're developing the science now, I fully expect things like mental eugenics to actually become a thing in the near future. It really, when people like you and I, John, as NTPs, are basically hunted down and removed or disappeared from society because, people like us end up challenging, the society. We're not affiliative or pragmatic. We're not going to accept the authoritarian. We're not going to. Why I stopped.
I'm not going to take the social credits. I won't be able to open up my. Won't be able to open up my refrigerator.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can make arguments towards thought police at that point, from a 1984 standpoint. But like, people have to understand that Jungian analytical psychology is itself inherently Orwellian, even though it can be utilized for good things. But now, I'm not an advocate of burning books, because just like I told somebody recently, when you're teaching people how to social engineer people, don't you realize that that's immoral? And I'm like, yeah, well, are you also one of those people that advocates burning books because the narrative would disagree with your current government system that could lead to revolution?
Well,
are you going to go that far?
I've probably given health advice to horrible people. It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty, it's pretty lame, but the point is that, what we really have to focus on is like what's true or false, what's good or bad, but beyond that, what is wise? Because knowledge with containment is wise, because there's proper containment to knowledge that can be executed better. Whereas, as just Domesday had, just mentioned, about the U.S. Navy and reactor designs that can melt down, et cetera. There's a reason. Everything could be done better, but it's like, oh, okay, well, then there's money that comes into play and all of that, and it's like, okay, great, we could always do better. And that's the thing, human beings are so focused on self-interest that there's a difficulty and a lack of understanding in fellow human beings. So here's the thing, self-interest doesn't really come into play much if every human being understands everybody, which is why it's important that this science becomes mainstream, because at that point in time, it's like, okay, hey, then, if everyone understands each other, then, guess what? The next level is that everyone's going to end up loving each other because they understand each other so much. And then there's so many conflicts that are going to go away, but it has to be deployed at a macro level. And that's the main point I'm trying to make here. So anyway.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it for the conference tonight. Thank you all for joining us. It's been fantastic. John, thank you for coming. We're great. We're going to see you live in 2 weeks doing a health Q&A for the audience on the live stream. And hopefully Jason Hooper can join us as well. That would be great. But yeah, we'd like to have you there for that. Probably about 2 Thursdays from now is probably when it's going to be at 9 Eastern. But otherwise, thank you all for coming for the June conference. It was fantastic. It was very fun. Love you all. Thank you for being Ruby subscribers here on our Patreon. And hopefully we can move forward, together as a community to help make the world a better place for not just like the world, but also like even our families or even ourselves as well. It really has strong applications to us as individuals from a health or political or psychological standpoint for us to be able to move forward that way together. So, and that's what our goal is. So anyway, folks, with that being said, you all have a great night, and we'll talk to you again, John, in 2 weeks. See you all then, and see you all later. Have a good night.